you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and for whoever is watching, thank you for the NBO Film Festival conversation over the film by the Nest Collective, entitled The More Things Change. I'm here with the filmmakers, and before I say anything, let me just say congratulations, guys, on making this film. I got to see it. I'm really blessed for it, and thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce the directors of the film. We have in the house Akati Khasiani.
Hello.
Flowers and applause. And we have Maasai. Yes. And he was the director of photography on the film, as well as one of the writers. I don't know why he doesn't want to take the mantle of director, because I believe there was a bit of some three-way work going on this work as far as the larger ideas went. But I'd like to give you a pleasure to introduce someone I've worked with before, Noel Kasyoka. Karibu, man.
Thank you very much.
All right, and at last the film is out, and it has been seen, and it's continued to being seen. And my first question, of course, is how does it feel to have your baby out there and walking and now on display for the world after your world premiere of the film at the NBO Film Festival? How does it feel?
It's an interesting mixed bag of feelings, so for me, because it's just it's just out, and I'm trying to. It's weird because like you kind of want to shield yourself from hearing what everyone has to say about it, but at the same time you do want to hear what everyone is saying about it. I was up until I think 1 a.m. yesterday, seeing what a few people on their social medias, like what their thoughts were. And I must say, there's some stuff I saw and I was very happy. And I'm like, bro, stop gassing yourself up. I'm like, just relax. But at the same time, it's very nice to see like your work validated out there. And I haven't received any constructive criticism, I'll call it that yet. But like, I'm looking forward to a time when it's like, when the freshness of the film is out and people don't feel that obligation of like, I'm so happy for you. And then you can have that, okay, so what do you really think about it? But yes, it's a mixed bag of feeling right now, but mostly good.
Mm-hmm. How about the directors?
Yeah, well, me, here's the thing, like I'm very used to hiding immediately after something I'm involved in is released. Like I'll just avoid all social media. I'll avoid everything I can avoid. Anything that's linked to the work that I've put out, I'll try my best to avoid it. So this is very new to me, like doing a panel like the next day after release is all kind of new to me, but it's been an interesting feeling. Unlike Noel, I have not interacted with any sort of feedback. Immediately the link went up. I think I almost deleted Twitter from my phone. I posted a note on Instagram, and I haven't checked. So if anyone said anything positive or otherwise on Instagram, unfortunately, I haven't seen it up until now. But it feels good. I showed it, I sent the link to a couple members of my family. So that's the only feedback I've received. And so far they were like, yo, it's cool. Like these stories you're telling are cool. So that's really nice to like hear back from them.
All right. Yeah. Akati.
Same thing. It's a spectrum. So super thrilled that it's actually out. It's been a labor of love. We've worked on it for a while. And just to get to that point where we tell each other, you know what, it's done. It's cooked. It has to go out there. And then, you know, the anxiety of going into the world, you know, did we do what we were hoping to do? We're going to find out. Will people enjoy it? Will people criticize it? We don't know. And I guess that's true of any piece of art.
Absolutely.
So anxiety, but also really, really intense joy. So we'll see.
That's
I think
wonderful.
the rest of the week is going to remain a roller coaster.
Well, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say to make something in this Kenya of ours, to actually make it and put it out there and have it be seen by people is a feat in and of itself that is worth celebrating, regardless of the material. But add to that the fact that this is material that is important, material that causes us to converse, that causes us to think, and has been made by, you know, with love and attention and empathy and talent.
Sorry, I think we've lost Mugambi, or
I think that for those of you who are joining, I joined political resistance. It involves people coming. Oh, sorry about that. Am I back? Okay.
Yeah, you have a bit of a lag.
Oh, okay.
I missed everything just right before political resistance.
Right. Okay. So you didn't miss much. So yes. It explores the personal and community cost of political resistance as seen through 3 different characters played by the same actor. So summary being Neema, we have Neema, a journalist at an independent newspaper struggling to break an important story in the wake of a nationwide ban on political reporting. I would like to imagine that this was in the early 80s. Then after being rendered homeless, Carol hits back at the faceless forces that are unlawfully demolishing her neighborhood for personal gain. And I believe that was in present day. Am I correct so far? Okay. And Jay, a rebellious hacker in the future, in a Kenyan future, seeks out her sister who has gone missing while on a government exchange trip to Lebanon. And that is the summary of the film. And of course, if you've seen it, it's a completely different experience for me to explain it in words and for you to see it in pictures and to have periods evoked, you know, places that evoke the past, places that remind us of the present, and places that have us imagining what the future could be like. I am very curious as to what the genesis of this story was, how it came into fruition, how it came into being in your minds, and how you are able to actually pay attention and love on it enough to bring it to its completion. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first because I think my 2 colleagues here both were writers of part of the script, and they'll probably have more to say. But at least one part of the seed was something that you mentioned, and that is place. So one of the things that we were really thinking about the story was, where are we setting it, and why are we setting it there? And we chose Nairobi because we kind of understand it as residents. We've lived this energy for maybe more than we want to admit on public fora. And then there was COVID at the same time. So there was an interesting thought about how do we make our film set as low risk as possible. And so once we were thinking about space, and we're like, what spaces have been public, have been or should be politicized, and have played a role in acts of resistance from the past. One of our initial drafts of the story was actually still in a social hall, but set in just pre-independence Kenya. And it was going to be kind of a spy tale of using this space that has been given to us to socialize, to get to meet each other, but also to remind us that, you know, this is the place where Black people in their own homeland are allowed to be, you know? And so we said this space then lived through, you know, it's been there. So it was there pre-independence. It was there as soon as we got Uhuru. It watched Eastlands evolve over time. and it's still standing, this physical space that we shot in. And so we wanted to take snapshots of its life and say, so this is something that could have happened in this space. This is something that could happen in this space. And this is how people in their ordinary day-to-day, because it's a social hall, you know, it's not the seat of government, it's not a think tank, you know, it's somewhere you go on the weekend and hang out with the people in your neighborhood. And that's where you start to hear what's been going on, what's been going wrong, and start thinking about how does this affect me and what am I going to do about it? And so we placed our characters in that space and saw what happened next.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, like much like Akati has said, central, I guess the other central theme in this film was, other than the work of activism or forms of activism, was place, and ideally Nairobi. So personally, I'm what you'd call or what you describe a born Tao. And yeah, me, I have no shame about it. Like, Nairobi is all I know. And that the stories were kind of personal in some ways, because first and foremost, I came up and wrote past. I came up with and wrote the past. And I guess the thing is that when I was growing up, I grew up like in the 90s in company housing. And I mean, in, like, you know, the way companies used to have like houses for their employees and all that. And
yeah,
where we used to stay, we could not talk badly, or we could not criticize the government at the time, which was Moi's government, because my parents had a lot of anxiety that like some of our neighbors were in the service, right, or were in his service, and anything that you said or anything that you spoke out of term could have serious repercussions for the entire family. So it's a thing that I had grown up seeing and hearing, even though I didn't necessarily grow up in the 80s. But there was still a lot of fear around like the long arm of the president, as it were, during that period. So that came from like a sort of like a personal experience. And then second, like the idea for present, which Noel executed quite brilliantly with the script, was also that having grown up in company housing and having very many friends who grew up in Nairobi, in similar situations, like either it's railways, either it's teleposta or whoever, who are the major employees, there's been a lot of resettlement. Well, if we could call it that. I use that term very generously, but the government has come, the government has come in very strongly with this grand idea of a new Nairobi, right? And it's posh, it's clean, it's, I don't know, it's a lot of things that these neighborhoods technically aren't. And so what the government has been doing, and that also happened to us where we used to stay, me and my family, is that we had to be moved out because the government had other plans for that that plot of land. And the thing that I think is continuously lost in this conversation around the settlement in Nairobi is that Nairobi has, like, these are communities you're moving. These aren't just like people who, the assumption is always that people come into Nairobi to live here, right? And no one calls Nairobi home, but there are people who call Nairobi home, right? And we make these communities. So when the government comes in and just decides, yeah, we're going to take people out, they don't necessarily factor the toll that it has on relationships, on people's emotions, on very many things.
On their sense of belonging.
Yeah, and their sense of belonging as well. Yeah. And so, like, when the idea of past is, the social hall is based in Karioko, which is right next to Ngara. And I am also from Pangani, which is quite close. Like, it's a triangle of neighborhoods in a way. And so it means a lot from a personal place as well, because I've been to that hall. I've been there for functions. I've been there for all these things. And before the last general election, all my friends from Gara and all my friends from Ziwani and Karioko had this immense fear that the government is planning to evict them so that they can do like new neighborhoods and new housing, which they always say they'll prioritize the old tenants, but it never works out that way for whatever reason. And it's already happening. There's a neighborhood right next to the social hall called Jivanji, and guys were evicted. Well, guys were moved out. Let me not use the word evicted. Guys were moved out about towards late last year, and now it's under construction. And a lot of people are losing their homes. A lot of people are losing their sense of community and belonging. And that's why we wanted to situate the hall, and also just as a tribute, because in a couple of years' time, we might not be seeing these spaces. We might not have any memories of these spaces. There's no one who's documenting these spaces. We went to one of these halls during the scouting session, and I'll end quite briefly, but like we went to one of these halls and it's dilapidated. We went to Pumwani Social Hall, and it's a famous hall. That's where like Pal boxing gym is. That's like it's a part of this city's history, you know, but it's run down. No one is really taking care of it. And in a couple of years, because of the neglect, someone is going to say, let's build a shopping mall right here. And no one is going to bat an eye, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's another key theme, another central theme of the film that we were hoping to at least bring out. Yeah.
Noel, do you have anything to add to that? Because, you know, it's a heck of a conversation starter.
I know. Maybe what all I can add is maybe what led to why we chose to format the film as a triptych as opposed to just like a standard film or any other format with like multiple characters. I think we felt that if we were able to divide these stories, we were able to hone in on certain issues in certain ways that we wouldn't have been able to if we had kind of like one long film set in the same world, featuring different characters going through different things. We kind of really wanted people to be able to feel like in my head, I call it the special branch world was like a thing. So that was past. And then to really feel like present was, I call it community hall, that story, like to really feel it, because it comes not with just the characters, but like the look and the feel of the film. So that's the setting, the color grading, and the music, like everything really making you feel like this is something else, but it's still, you know, Nairobi, because again, Nairobi is Nairobi, but people, I really like it when you're like on social media or somewhere and guys are like, are we in the same Nairobi? Because things can really be different. Yeah. And so same with Future, and really create kind of a prediction that's not really too far-fetched, but still have it locked in on the same plane. So yeah.
It's quite interesting. I'm actually seeing this perspective for the first time now about the social hall actually being a character in the film. It makes sense now. It shows up as this place of nice, fun times. It's a place where families congregate and can go there and feel safe and feel happy and celebrate. But it's also shows where the political uprising is fomenting. This is where the conversations are being had. This is where intel is being exchanged. And then, you know, we fast forward to the future where at that point, at least the end of that story, it's the characters that are in danger. And when we come to the present, the space has completely changed. It's making sense to me now. So thank you. Space has completely changed. And now the conversations are now about fomenting rebellion are not being had in secret. People are not hiding their faces when people pass by. It's open conversations of, let's just F this ish up, you know, which and I'm not asking you to talk about this, whether they actually succeed in doing it or not. I think that's one of the things that you wanted to remain open. But if you could please tell me how it showed up in the future, because I'm not sure. You talked about the past and the present, but in this story, you're actually creating the future. I'm imagining, what did you see the future of these spaces being?
It was I guess, a little unfortunate or dystopic, because to carry on, another thing that we kind of wanted to show is continuous, is inherited. The energy of resistance necessarily comes up generation after generation, even though one form of oppression has been knocked down, you know? So you're born and you learn that, oh, you know, once we were colonized, but someone took care of it. Then you learn, oh, once we were in a totalitarian state, someone took care of it. Capitalism is running us over, someone's gonna take care of it. So in the future, we're kind of now in this panopticon, but it's a benevolent one. Because apparently, if you toe the line, you wear your watch, you get your points, you know, there's a welfare system in place. But at the same time, you are surveilled, you are controlled by a government that you can't quite see. And so if you think of the closing of part 3, we are in a hall again, but this hall doesn't belong to the people. You know, this hall has gone back to the state. To enter the hall, you pass through security checks, guards. You have to show them your monitoring status. Another thing about that hall, we don't get to see the community. You know, we see the performers, we see the MC, we see Miss Singira, who is kind of the emblem, you know, the influencer for the government. So that's the person you see, but everything else is pitch black.
Yeah, and it's kind of
and
set
to get in
stage.
there, there's also just one last thing, where we are going with technology and what is it doing for us and what are we able to get it to do for us, but also what is it going to take from us. And so the sense of community for me, at least in part 3, was very much at Kila Kitu, because there you can see Baba Kama is someone who has seen the young people grow up. You know, he has the receipts. You know, he probably smacked them for trying to steal lollipops in their youth. You know, he knows them now as adults, as traitors to the energy of this neighborhood. So that's kind of where we're seeing this going. And I think there's a lot of discourse around people kind of saying we are divesting from the state, we're divesting from the government. We're trying to figure things out on our own. And I think that's why we had these two spaces that were so disconnected, because that's where we kind of see ourselves. We have to keep relying on ourselves to solve problems that the state should be managing.
It's wonderful. Noel, I believe you were adding something onto that point.
Yeah, I was just jumping on to add about how we decided to focus on the stage. So that's where kind of everyone was sort of leaning on a pedestal, as opposed to how in present and future, either everyone was clumped together or everyone would be together within this, on the same level.
Yep. Okay, I see it. Wow. All right. Let's talk about, and you've made a lot of allusions to this. If you can talk about place and time. And it says my connection is unstable. I don't know if you can still hear me. Okay. Yeah. I felt the desire to situate us in those places and in those times, and to understand what the complexities were and set those up before we were catapulted ahead in time to another space, another time, and more complex problems. I'm wondering, in the technical elements of the film, how you worked to make these seen, not just in the production design and costume, but I noticed a difference in language, speaking, pristine Kiswahili at the beginning, going into Sheng, and then going almost to like swinging the other way and speaking pristine English almost all through. I don't know if my observations are correct on that, but I saw there were all these things. There were things, elements that you placed that were very specific for that time and place, not just to situate us, but to say something about those times and places. Could we speak a little bit about that? I really like to know the decisions that were made in the construction of the film.
First, there's kind of like two parts, because we were very intentional about that, but at the same time, for the same reason why because we had a whole, I remember we had a whole string of meetings about whether we should be very specific about the time periods and whether we should name them. So like be like past is the 80s, present is present, but which present, and then future is future, which future, how long are we projecting into the future? But we opted to kind of leave that slightly vague, because we were like, if we decided to make past a certain time period, and then we're like, that comes up, that brings about an added burden of like, so 1886, 1986, what kind of Swa are people speaking? What kind of meaning is this? What kind of, what kind of people are wearing? What kind of like, so we didn't necessarily want to be too specific, but like, we're trying to do a period piece, but we don't want to be overly specific about that. So we lent ourselves some liberties, and I'm very glad that it still came through as distinct. Each section came across very distinct in its characteristics, in the stuff that we wanted to come through. That said, I'm gonna step back and let maybe Akati and Maz add on to that answer.
I know, I guess the language thing was, yeah, I mean, like the Sheng Swahili bit, using Swahili in the past, and I guess that came from just like what I would hear growing up a lot, and also just hanging around some of these neighborhoods. Yeah, before Sheng took its roots properly, right? At least we had to honor that time period by not, also none of us could like remember like exactly how specific the language was at the time. So Swahili Sanifu felt like a safer bet, but also, to be fair, particularly around that Karioko area, and Siwani, and Majengo, there was a lot of like settlement from people from the coast. So also it was kind of in keeping with the area as well. Right. Yeah, but for present, I guess there's not much. We just wanted it to mirror how the use of neighborhoods in Nairobi, and when Noel says Nairobi is a big place, yeah, but like some neighborhoods of Nairobi, the youth sound a certain way, right? And they talk a certain way. And we didn't even, in some ways, we didn't even go as hard as, you know what I mean? Yeah, like Sheng is evolving at such a rapid pace. And the youth are, like, younger people are talking in such, you know, I could almost say cryptic languages or versions of Sheng, but we wanted to at least keep it at a level that like viewers could understand, as many viewers as possible could understand. And as far as future, if you look at Baba Kama, and there's a thing Akati had mentioned about like, there's no hall in the neighborhood, but then it's the same neighborhood, right? The same neighborhood from the 80s all the way up until the future. So Baba Kama was probably a kid back then, and he grew up during the present, and he saw this changes in the neighborhood. And you can sort of hear how he sort of harkens to that past, but then maybe the newer members of the neighborhood don't necessarily have that same connection in terms of language, and that's perhaps they're leaning towards English. But you can see Baba Kama is more like, yeah, he speaks more like he's from either present or he grew up in the past or something like that. So it's still in keeping, just honoring the fact that, yes, even though you can assume that the government was successful in their plans to move people out, but some people remained and some elements of the neighborhood remained. So that's one way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to speak about the fact that there was a lot of English in the future, or am I seeing too much into this? Forgive me if I am.
No. Maybe something else is we liked the kind of the irony of progress, yeah. That's not progress, and yeah. It's kind of still happening now, because in the future world, I'm sorry, I'm here battling a few kittens around me. Okay. There's a thing that the Kenyan state in the future section, you have the state all like, okay, so now we have Prima, and we've had all these people, we've had different classes of Kenyans kind of being shipped away, and now it's the creatives' turn to, you know, go out and represent us. And the athletes have done it, who has done it, and it's like, oh hey, Kenya progress, but at the same time, and I have like a super mixed relationship about my relationship as an African with English, and other languages, other foreign languages.
Just mispronounce some words.
Bruh, nah,
the culture.
accent's a whole different thing. But yeah,
management.
But at the same time, like almost everyone in future is, you know, it's in English, like the ads in English, everything, you know, it's super on that spectrum, and it's kind of still happening now, because we're still the same country that's here doing CGI, we're trying to do expressways and stuff, and I'm like, bro, when you look at people who have been there, that's not what, like they tried that and that was not a good idea, and us, we're here spearheading headfirst and still spewing, this is the future, we've seen the future in other time zones, it is not what now. So yeah, so we like that happy irony, you know, like it's not too far-fetched to imagine that that's what's going to be happening a few years into the future in this country of ours that tunapenda sana.
I'd also like to say that you mentioned that production design also came in really strong to kind of give these things a distinct feel. And that was a lot of fun. That was one of the most fun things we did, putting together, just being like, you know, me, when I think of the 80s, I remember people had money plants and like Peugeots, you know, so that kind of stuff was really fun. But I think another thing that really worked through the scripting and through the actors' embodiments of these times is also kind of the energy of the hope of people, or what the Kenyan dream was. So if you go into past and you have an older gentleman who believes in his state job, his pension, his benefits, but a younger person who apparently has an education that could get him all that is already at risk, kind of, you know, because Jackson anafanya biashara, you know, he's not gotten into this permanent pensionable nation building energy of the previous generation. And you come into the two, and also you can see a family, you know, it's a little unorthodox because it's an uncle raising his nibblings, you know, not father, mother, child, but it's still kind of blood connections, family ties that were very strong. And because of the issues of oppression at that time, you were safest with people, you know, who you knew very, very well. We move into the future and listen to the kinds of jobs these kids are talking about. I have advanced education, I don't have a job. I have an advanced education, I don't have a home, right? And the other thing I realized about present is there's a lack of what we would call adults, you know? You have these kids kind of having to figure out life on their own. And I think there's a lot of people in their 20s now who that is exactly how they feel, you know? They have to figure this out, hustle, work with their friends, etc. And then you go to the future. And I mean, maybe English is coming in so much because we're moving in this globalization direction, where we're following a linear path development. Like Noel had, the future needs to look like a future in Sweden, which, you know, it does not. But in order to drive us in that direction, in order to be a person who can join a Kenya Kwa Dunia program and earn money for your family, you need to use a language that's accepted on a global scale, right? Whatever your feelings may be, whatever your family situation may be, whatever your own thoughts about culture, the access to a better life for yourself or your family is being put on these globally accepted standards, and the Kenyanness of ourselves is being asked to take a step back, you know? So
right.
Just shifting through things like that, energy, connections, what families look like, where we find our support, at different times, and how people from different generations are looking at the same thing and not seeing the same thing, you know, or not being able to react the same way because they've had such different experiences. Like Maz said, we most of us grew up in the 90s, so about the 80s. So, you know, there are some people who would be like, how did people let that go on so long? But then the people who were adults at that time were probably, you know, still in the shadow of what getting us independence cost them, and so on and so forth. So we always have our own experiences trying to adapt to a new world, and then a new generation who have this as the only world they've ever known. And how do we make ourselves connect and realize we're on the same team and we want the same things?
Oh, man. It's a very, very dense subject matter. Obviously, dense conversations were had in the making of this work. I would like to address that, but first I would like to ask about the protagonists. So this film has 3 protagonists: Neema, Caro, and Jay. And one happens to be a journalist. The other one happens to be part of this group of young people that just want to wreak havoc as a state. And there's Jay, who's a hacker. So each of these people using the tools available to them to do something, to resist, to make statements of activism, to stand on their 2 feet and
Hello.
Oh my God, I dropped again. I'm sorry. Okay, what was the last thing you heard?
To stand with the 2 feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is what led to the choice of having this person, these 3 people play
Hello.
by the same person? And what was behind that, but also the larger ideas, because did I drop off again?
A bit.
Slightly.
Okay. So you know, what led to the decision to have this person played by these 3 people played by the same person? I will meanwhile change my connection and then hop back on the call, but please go crazy. I'll be back in literally 30 seconds. Who wants to go first?
There's a thing I need to, when we were first coming up with the story, the idea was that, well, the first version of the story was that this character would die.
Wait, before you start, let's just have a spoiler warning for everyone who is watching. I mean, we know it's late, but yeah, there's going to be maybe some potential spoilers ahead. Okay.
I'll try my best. I'll talk about the version of the film as it was before, right? Like the story, right? And the idea was that you have this person, you have this, the very first idea for the film was that you have this character who's engaged in the fight against the government. And they started this fight in the past and they didn't win for whatever reason. Like they passed away and they were brought back in the present to have the same fight. And again, well, they were also brought back in the future, essentially the same fight. And the idea was that they were eventually going to win this fight that they've had in their previous lives or in their past lives against the same enemy. So that was the idea behind. It feels weird explaining this to Akati and Noel, and not the moderator.
Right.
Okay. But that was the idea. Yeah, that was the idea behind the at least the very beginning, the very first idea of the film. But now what that morphed to be, and it's kind of a literal interpretation if you want to look at it that way. It's a bit perhaps on the nose. The film is called The More Things Change, right? And so you have like the same person, essentially, which is why we use the same character in past, present, and future, because we wanted to show that each generation in this country, each generation of young people, particularly from after independence, has essentially been involved in a major conflict with the government in one way or another. And whether that conflict was to do with jobs, whether that conflict was to do with state surveillance, whether that conflict was to do with housing, whatever it was, there's always a massive fight that the youth of the country are dealing with when it comes to the government at one point. Like currently, I guess you could say that the current struggle is to do with employment, it's to do with education, and it's to do with at least some rights. There's been heavy-handed policing in some neighborhoods in the city, and that's a real struggle that people are going with. And the thing that we were trying to show is that even as regimes change and even as times change, the youth of this country are still engaged in a fight with the government. And the thing that has remained constant is that the government isn't listening. Throughout the different time periods, the government just isn't listening. And so that's why it's essentially called The More Things Change, because the extension of that is the more things change, the more things stay the same, right? And in that way, it's kind of bleak, because what we're saying is that even in the future, I mean, we'll still be fighting with the government, right? Hopefully, I don't know, maybe we'll have a new generation of leaders come in and change things. Who knows? That's up to see. But essentially, that's why we had the same character, because we want to show that we are all connected as young people. We are the same people, regardless of how we might view, like you were born in the 80s, you grew up in this period, you grew up in this period or that period, that we all have had to face the man in one way or another. So that's essentially why you had this one character recurring throughout the film. But I'll leave it up to Noel and Akati to also chime in.
No, you pretty much tied everything in, including the title.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We're joined by a group of people who are watching on Valiant. It's good to see you. It was good to see you in the film. I like the comment that you made, that the neglect of these social spaces is as though that neglect isn't intentional. Yes, absolutely. And Sheba saying we're here and hanging on to every word. Valiant saying happy to be thinking about reincarnations and reincarnations of struggle this fine Saturday afternoon. This said, I'm asking this question from the point of view of a storyteller as well. It could be argued, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, that that the stories would take the form of setting up the time and space, setting up what the complexity was, the thing that had the thing that had to be overcome, and would always drop at the bit where that thing wasn't conclusively overcome, even if the steps were taken towards it. Would you say that these stories had resolutions in and of themselves, or would you say that the attempt, just the sheer will to do something about it was in and of itself a resolution?
For me, I love a question. So having endings that are open to interpretation was actually really important for me, because then it's more of what this film or this part of the film, what did you think? Whose side were you on? Why? What do you think happened next? In some ways, we were setting up the time and the problem, but we were also setting up the character, because another wanted to get into was these people that we accept as leader struggle or as sacrifices to a a better tomorrow, you know. There's a way we can glorify them to a point of dehumanizing them. And so what was really important was that, you see, this is a person, you know, this is a young woman with siblings or friends or ambitions or hopes, or she really, really needs to find, and then she wants to go back to dance school. But because of the situation that they're in, they're pushed to take a step, you know. It's not all being the chosen one and being anointed into this great energy of leadership and sacrifice. It is regular people trying to live regular lives who are pushed to a limit and have to respond. And in that way, in as much as we're saying the energy, you know, is existing in this person, it's kind of also existing in all of us, being not to that corner, or our stories not being told that loudly, you know. So there's a way that we, at least I also want people to project themselves onto our protagonists and be like, you know, before the decision to do this very publicly, you know, this thing that will be written in the public record a certain way, you know, described as a dissident or fomenting revolution, you know. There was a person trying to live a life, and if things had, you know, if the government had done what it was supposed to do and taken care of its citizens, they wouldn't have found themselves on this super dramatic road to heroism or martyrdom. And so that's why we also keep talking about the costs of resistance, and asking us to think, you know, if indeed we are this person, you know, it needs to be me who steps up, then what are the ways I can make it so that my situation is never that dire? Is signing a petition, you know, a low stake is going to vote a low stakes way of getting the change you want? Because this is the spectrum, you know. We want a tomorrow, so you can start by teaching your kids a better way to talk to each other, how to be respectful, how to value other people's property and protect their own, you know, all these things. That's something you can do in your home, and you're making sure that things are not boiling to a tipping point as they could if everyone was just kind of waiting for a hero to appear, because there are no heroes. We all need to be heroes.
All right.
Also, maybe I can add that I really like your question, Gabi. I'm very happy about this question, because again, just like the being specific about time periods, things is something we also really struggled about, because there was another scene at the very end that we decided to delete. We had a scene, and then we had a voiceover that we wanted to play over credits, that would have served as sort of a resolution, or sort of a, you know, kind of a, yeah. But then we were like, and I guess that was tied even into what we originally wanted, or one of the versions of the film that existed, as Mas said before, about the hero prevailing. So like the hero kind of going through the journey, the past failing, present failing, and then in future either prevailing or having this resolutive scene. But yeah, we decided to take that out again, and kind of partially, there's something at the back of my mind that tells me, because we have this joke in the collective that we never make happy works, at least when it comes to our films. When our films just do dark things, and then we make music, we do happy-go-lucky. But also because we kind of still tie the story within the cycle of the story, as Akati has just mentioned, and that's why we wanted things to kind of stick on. I know I was very happy about that decision, and for me, it was very much, I was kind of locked in when I saw, I'm forgetting the name of this movie, but like after we shot the movie and it was in edit, like the final stages of edit, the Oscars kind of happened, and then that Joey Badass film where he kept being murdered by a cop. kind of won an Oscar for best short film, and guys were like, "Bruh, what is this?" And I realized that the format is kind of similar to these films in a sense that he keeps like there's a cycle, and then at the end they had this key resolution, and guys were like, "Bro, there's a problem here, and we're not really feeling a sense because you're kind of telling people, you're kind of presenting people with this existing problem that's very personal and close to them, and then kind of having this." I'm going to shy away from using the word cheap, but I'm going to say unsuccessful attempt at applying balm and saying, "Oh, Paula Baba, it'll be fine." It's very
unsatisfactory.
Thank you. Yeah, because if I don't know how I would have felt if I was, for example, Nema or Jay, and then having at the end a resolution or some sort of resolutive thing, and it's like, "Bro, but yeah, I'm still here. These things are still happening." And because each and every story in this film, one or another, are similar to real life stories. We didn't want to like have them directly inspired by anything, but like it's even crazy to see, like, post writing, post shooting, post edit, we're still seeing similar stories happening. So that was incredibly. That's incredibly, Also, I don't know, I'm saying incredibly, and we're the same country who were literally threatened with jail time if you didn't take Huduma number. And then here we are years later.
It was deportation, and I'm still waiting.
Like, bro, like I'm telling you, it's like we keep getting gaslit, and then we're like, okay, fine, it can't happen again. We're the same country that held a general election 10 days after a top official for the Electoral Commission was murdered under very suspicious circumstances. But we said, what, next week, election, and we did. So I'm like, it's a weird thing. I'm like, we're being shown, we're like, yeah, we don't care, and to do, but cycle keeps happening. Anyway, me, I'm virgin to my field because, yeah, I really have feelings about our state. But yeah.
If I can add just very briefly, just like both what Noel and Akati said, in response to your question, other than a resolution, I think for me, I think the important thing was also to honor the struggle, right? And just show, like, at least introduce how the struggle has changed and how the struggle has impacted us as a city, as a country, as youth through different time periods, and just at least perhaps have the youth now situate themselves, or at least just situate themselves in what's happening now, and seeing the history of how the youth have been involved in the struggle from the past. So necessarily it wasn't to show people winning or losing per se in this fight, but to honor that there are people who have been involved in this fight, and it came at a great cost to them. And in some ways, like, a lot of these periods have been undocumented, present, past, and there's very little documentation in terms of film around that period, and present, at least particularly with this issue, there's very little documentation around. And for future, there's a thing that I don't know if guys are catching, but there's a lot that's happening right now with regards to, like, girls, young women who are going to the Middle East, and they don't always come back, right? So that's also a thing that was sort of being referenced in future as well. Like, it's sort of like a present day struggle, but it's sort of being projected into the future as well. So I guess the whole point of the film was to honor the struggle and to show people that this work can come at a cost as well, like in terms of, like, personal life, your relationships, and all these things. And in some ways, at least to me, that was more important, or let me not say more important, that took but I'm still saying the same thing. That took precedence over like a resolution. Yeah.
All right. So Shiba, I agree with you completely in the chat saying the device worked beautifully, and Nyawara is indeed a phenomenal performer. I agree completely, man. She came through, did the thing, and props to you, Nyawara. It's an honor to know you, I have to say. And Duta Kamere says we truly all need to be heroes, and she mentioned that the film was called Two Distant Strangers. I was trying to remember the name as well.
Thank you.
And literally, yeah, that movie was called No, that's this film. Valiant, to answer your question, they were going to take us to Canada. At least I imagined that I was going to get deported to. That's where we were supposed to go, right? It wasn't Kenya.
That's why we.
No, Maz, just crack it. It's fine. It will live in the internet for 2 minutes.
Okay, so I've been framing this question in my head. I'll try and make it as clear as possible, and I'll frame it this way: the more things change, the more they remain the same. It's the title of the film. I'll frame it this way. Let's imagine that the alternate titles that were on the table in consideration were The Sins of the Fathers visited on the sons, or let's imagine another alternative was if we don't, what's the saying? If we don't learn from the past, then we are bound to repeat it. So of course the terrible titles, but I'm wondering if these themes also showed up. They've been alluded to, and I wanted to focus on them a little bit. You have people of one generation facing one thing, and by the time we're getting into the next story, we imagine that some of these things have been resolved and some of them have not. And we also imagine that for others, for the people in the present, there's stuff that they've gone through that they have not resolved that show up again in the future. I'm wondering if this showed up in the writing as well, and how, if you'd want to talk about that really briefly, because we'll be wrapping up after this. But go ahead. I really am curious because I think you guys are phenomenal storytellers, hearing what has been said and how bravely you're able to approach these things and cause us to look at ourselves. What conversations were those that you were having? How are they showing up, and what is it that you feel about these things?
If I may ask, please repeat those the two alternate titles, please. I know The Sins of the Fathers. I don't know which of them.
The Sins of the Fathers, and If We Don't Learn from Our Past.
Sorry,
also,
yeah.
No. Also, Muga, sorry, I dropped off, so I missed a chunk of that question. I missed at least the opening thought behind that question, so I'm not sure exactly how to respond. So yeah.
So I'll try and ask you shortly, as because again, like I said, I wasn't sure I had framed it, but should those, we imagine if those were two alternate titles for the film, I'm wondering if these films showed up in the storytelling, where you have people imagining that, just like Akati said at the beginning, we solved that issue, yet they keep showing up and reanimating in different ways. I'm just wondering how this thinking showed up in one generation. Let me put it this way. Literally, I imagine that when Caro is joining up with her gang, Nema is now an older woman who's looking back on these young people and being like, where, yo. And I imagine that Caro and Nema exist in the world of Jay, and there's this like generational thing happening. And I'm wondering if that factored into the conversations you were having around the film.
Yeah, for sure.
No, go ahead. No.
I remember versions of the script when they were like early on, when things hadn't been chopped down, and we had extra storylines, extra characters, and we did see like these things did overlap in some sense, or they did come into play in a more fuller sense. I know we have felt some type of way about them as they stand, because they have a vibe that are kind of a pointing finger-ish. And I know for how, with whom we decided to choose to focus the stories on, we kind of cut out the perpetrators, so to speak. For example, I know in past, a perpetrator, past maybe cut out, and with future. In present, it was kind of intentional because the characters it was supposed to feel like an unseen force. But then if we still, because of the scale and the scope of our stories, like we decided to focus on the people with whom the people whom the violence is kind of visited upon. So we were like, so scale down, focus on these people. It wouldn't have felt apt to have to still have those themes come into play enough.
Hello, Noel?
Did we lose Noel? I think we might have lost him.
Yeah.
And he was mid-thought. I was like hanging on to it. I don't know if you guys want to comment on the same, and then could carry on when he gets back.
I guess maybe the thing that's also important to note is that, like, when you have systemic failures that aren't being addressed, like, it just compounds over the years, right? And in many ways, I hate to keep bringing this back to the city, but in many ways, the problems that Nairobi is facing now, like, you could trace them way back to like systemic failures from the 80s and coming through, like the fear that people have of the police, for example, like it's well informed by years of such brutal policing in the city, right? That started around that period and we saw it all through the 90s and the 2000s and up until now. If we talk about like the housing issue, and then you sort of tie that to the death of state corporations and what that meant for the housing landscape of the city, right? And that majority, the biggest landowners in Nairobi were state corporations, right? And now we're facing a lot of challenge around urban settlement in the city. So I guess the thing that we are saying is that, like, systemic failures, they cannot be looked at in isolation. We can't say, especially if they weren't resolved, right? We can't say the 80s were a brutal period, but hey, nowadays the government is not like that. But then nothing was done to address like how the government was in the 80s, and that spilled over into the 90s, which spilled over into like where we are now, and is likely to spill over into the future. So if you have Neema still alive in a Kila Kitu store, she's probably shaking her head for like, yeah, what we were fighting back then, like, has just morphed, like it's just changed a suit, right? That's the only difference. Like, it's just changed the face, but ultimately we're still facing the same systemic challenges that we used to be facing, and in some version or another. And again, I'd just like to say that there are very many things that make people feel these issues differently. For example, there are people to whom maybe these versions of Nairobi might be a bit different. And there's a lot of factors around that. Like there's obviously the issue of class, there's the issue of economics, but you'll find that in some demographics or in some economic classes, that things haven't really changed in terms of how they relate to the government and how the government relates with them. And so that's one of that's I guess the thing that ties them together. But ultimately the commentary is that if systemic failures aren't addressed, regardless of whether that period was closed and whether we said we've forgiven those people or not, or they've died, or they've, whatever. As long as they weren't addressed, then they just spill over or they morph into something else. So yeah.
The more things change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought an interesting way that you could kind of see the ghosts of trauma's past is also by focusing on the characters playing alongside the protagonist. So if we take Neema's uncle as emblematic of a time period where people knew the thing to do to survive is keep your head down, do your job, pay your bills, kind of thing. Then we move a few decades into the future, and the ability to do that is not as present, but people are still kind of trying to work their way out. There's this narrative of getting out, and I think if you when you watch present, you'll see there are some people who are trying to figure out how to get out, how to no longer be in the community that is the target of all these problems, and then you come to the future and
Oh no. Sorry, Akati, we're missing what you're saying there. It's going to be interesting for the people watching.
Yeah.
You're gonna love this bit.
Who comes from a place that has been having these issues of resistance. We talk about rebellion coming from the.
Oh, Akati, we lost you. And I was laughing the point. It seems to be picking just the best times to just younger the connection.
This on my end also.
No, I see you. Yeah, welcome back. This is a yes or no question as Akati joins us. Was the alternate ending having all three versions of the people meet? It's just a yes or no.
Me, I don't want to say.
My answer is maybe.
We can do that. I'll take maybe. Akati, welcome back. Sorry you dropped off there.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
All right. I don't know if you had moved on. I think I caught you in the middle of something.
No, we hadn't. We were just waiting. I'd asked them a yes or no question, which I'll also ask you after you've finished.
Okay. No, I was just saying that there's a thread of responses, and I think those responses still being repeated in cycles tells us that we are responding to the same thing. So I think in each set you'll find a person who is saying, keep your head down, pay your bills, take care of your family, everything. No, don't rock the boat. In each set, there's a person who's saying the way to fix this is by getting out, either getting information out or getting out of the neighborhood or out of this social class. And then there's an interesting evolution of the use of, let's say, uniformed forces. And how they are able to kind of keep us in line, So from the very obvious brutalities of the 80s, which we know are not exactly gone, to a more money-based transactional way of interacting with this kind of brute force. And then now in the future where tech has come in, and you can be threatened without a physical presence, without someone standing in front of you holding a weapon, but your life can still be at risk. And so the characters are all responding to these things, in as much as, like Noel said, we spotlight different things, we highlight different things at different points in time. But if you're watching all the characters and how they're choosing to navigate, they're all navigating something. It's like when a step is broken in the house and everyone knows that step is broken, so you have to jump over it, but a new person could get trapped in it. But if you're there long enough, it gets into being part of your rhythm, part of your habit, and that's what we see consistent through the three pieces.
Mm-hmm. I'll be using that metaphor liberally, if you allow me, please, Akati, of the missing step in the house, because they don't fix the step. They ask you, why did you fall, you dumbass? And that's how it's been. Thank you so much, guys. I'll take just whatever closing statement, whatever thing that you think needs to be said. But before that, please, Noel and Maz, don't answer, don't say what you said. This is a yes or no question. Was this alternate ending, all three ladies meeting, was that what you imagined for the alternate ending that got dropped, or the resolution that never was, Nema, Caro, and Jay meeting? Y'all are good at evading that question. You've all given me answers.
Because you're asking if an energy can meet itself.
Why?
And, and in that case, does it remain itself? Does it become more itself? Does it dissolve itself into itself? It's just things to think about. Shower thoughts.
Basi umejibu hiyo swali vipoa, hata sina kitu ya kusema. Guys, hey, check notes. Hey, yo. So final statements, guys. Final statements about this film. It's out. It's there. The world is interacting with it. Your work is complete. We're rolling out the red carpet for a show I like. Please tell me how you feel. Give us an adios. I'm not even asking for a mic drop.
Okay.
It's just
no, I know. I think we really enjoyed this conversation. I know I really have, and none of us wants to leave, even though KPLC, internet, everything is telling us, yeah, it's too.
Yeah.
Just honestly, mixed bag of feelings. Please tell your, and this is to everyone who's on here. Please watch it. Please come talk to us about it. Please tell your people to watch it, and please come tell them to talk to us about it, and talk to other people about it. And not necessarily for the us that you've seen our films, but like I think we genuinely want to hear, and not just us who are here. We're here representing like the whole collective. We'd really be interested in hearing how you guys liked it, the ups, the downs. Please be kind, but like by being kind, I mean I just mean not polite. We really do take your thoughts seriously, because we do this for us, but mostly we do it for you guys, because you are us, and we are all Nema, we're all Jay, we're all presents, Carol. Tell you, there's something that happens after you leave script zone and you forget people's words. But yeah, and another event, I just like to thank Mugambi, and the whole NBO team. Like I'm very, very grateful that you got to premiere. I'm very happy for this conversation. Yeah, big thanks.
All right, yeah. Thank you, Noah. Thank you for making this and for being here.
Yeah, me yangu tu kusema asante. Thank you very much for allowing us to premiere at the festival. It's such an honor, and we're so happy and so thrilled that we were able to showcase in this way. And we like that it's online also, so that hopefully it reaches as many people as it can, all things considered. But yeah, I just want to say this film is, I guess, in many ways, honoring this city, and telling the stories of the city. And I'm really happy that I got to tell. Well, we got to tell. Sorry, yeah, I'm really happy we got to tell stories about neighborhoods that like we kind of like that feel familiar to us, and just honor our upbringings in these ways, right? We don't know what Nairobi is going to look like in the future. It's rapidly changing, but at least we've taken a snapshot of a period, and we've taken a snapshot of things that have such important historical place. And hopefully one day I'll be able to show, maybe, I don't know, my kids or grandkids, it's like, yeah, this used to be Karioko Social Hall, and this is what it used to mean to us. Yeah, so hope you guys watch it, hope you guys enjoy it, and like Noel said, give us feedback, but please be kind. And by kind, we don't mean untruthful, just don't insult us. That's pretty much it. But yeah, thank you.
Amen. All right, thank you so much, Mans. Thank you for what you made, and thank you for being here. Akati.
I also have a bucket of gratitude to pour out for everyone who worked really, really hard on this film. And I guess my main parting shot is watch the film, watch the credits. You know, there's so much talent that went into making this thing come out as well as it did. We have brilliant actors, some who are first-time actors, some who are first-time on film. People were showing up in the middle of the pandemic. We had people taking care of each other and making each other better. And for me, I want to say my first thanks, big up to the collective and to the cast and crew, for everyone showing up with their best selves almost every day and putting this thing together over all the challenges we had to face. Yeah, and same thing. Please enjoy it. Tell a friend to tell a friend. If you don't enjoy it, we still want to hear back from you. We loved making it. We love that it's out, and I guess, yeah, it's out there. So we're walking the journey for as long as it's around, which, because it's on the internet, is forever. So thank you, and we can't wait to hear from you.
All right, Joe. Guys, thank you so much for watching the makers of The More Things Change. Akati, Khasiani, Maasai, Noel Kasyoka, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for what you made. Thank you for your time. And guys, Shiba and Duta, Akati's #1 fan, Valiant, the whole team behind the NBO Film Festival. Yo, you guys are giving us something so important. I've enjoyed so much but watching these films. And I am so excited about the potential that we have as storytellers, the things that we could say. You talk about your kids, Mars, and I'm so glad that I get to live in a world where my kids can, should they come, would have things being said. Would have things being said about the city that they lived and grew up with, and they can have the retrospective look, and they can have their own past, presence, and future. And the past and the present is being shaped by y'all, and I celebrate you. I celebrate the team behind NBO Film Festival, and I celebrate film above all. It still is, to me, one of the most powerful media to exist, and one of the most powerful storytelling platforms. And thank you so much for guys for being a part of it. Thank you everyone for watching, and I wish you an awesome afternoon, evening, night, morning, wherever you may be. Be part of the change, yo. Please, please, and the good change. Yeah.
Be part of the change. We're hijacking that hashtag. Thanks.
Yeah.
And the good change. All right, guys. You guys have a very good one. Please go and celebrate your film. Get out of here. Get out of here. Go celebrate. Be good.
Thank
Be
you.
awesome.
You too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a lovely weekend.
Ah.
Thank you guys. Bye.